everybody, welcome back to another CLAT Tutor Legal discussion. I'm Shashank Tiwari from NLS Bangalore, and today we're continuing our discussion on criminal law. We finished part 1 in the previous video where we looked at the basics of the crime. What is a crime? What are its basic elements? And today we'll delve further into our discussions about criminal law, particularly how crimes are looked at and what are what's the next step after understanding what is a crime and what the elements of a crime are. So let's just get into criminal law 2. First, once the crime has been established and it has been proven in a court of law, the question then is, what is the punishment? Now, we all know that criminal law involves crimes as defined by law, and so the punishment is also defined by law. Every crime has its own set, punishment. There are some crimes that have greater punishment than more and some that are lesser in punishment. And the reason why we have this distinction is because, like the first point says, the simpler the offense, the simpler the punishment, and similarly simpler the procedure. For a punishment like the death penalty, it requires an extreme case. It requires a crime of the rarest of rare natures. And the reasons why they do this is because some of the punishments are quite extreme, that go as far as taking human life. And hence, these punishments should only be invoked when the crime is of such nature and the procedure for the same is also extremely complicated. For putting someone in prison maybe for 6 months, a simple court order or police investigation could do. But in cases of death penalties, there are additional safeguards and procedures just to ensure that the court does not make mistakes or the police does not miss any evidence here and there, which is why the simpler the offense, the simpler the punishment, and the simpler the procedure. Similarly, the more complicated the offense, the more complicated the punishment, and the more complicated the procedure. What is punishment? Punishment is a way of making sure that the person committing the crime is given some form of payback, or someone would say some sort of revenge, but that's not entirely true. Punishment acts in different ways, and one of the ways could be deterrence, where you would say that if you punish someone for doing something once, they won't do it again. Or punishment could also be a way of ensuring that deterrence is seen on third parties. So if someone is punished for committing a crime, other people look at this person and think, oh, I shouldn't do the crime because I might be punished as well. There are different ways to look at it, but restitution is not a primary purpose. Restitution would be to ensure that the person that whatever the mistake is done is somehow like the mistake is covered up, that the person is given a chance to re-enter society, or the person is allowed to change or improve on themselves. Although indirectly the entire justice system works in a similar model. If you look at the crimes in India, restitution is not the approach that is taken. The approach that is taken is punishment. It's a very punitive approach where the person should be punished for doing an act. It's like they say in school, if you make a mistake, there is some punishment. Similarly, if you commit a crime, there is a punishment. And in India, there are 6 types of punishments. There could be a mix or a few things here and there, but fundamentally, death, imprisonment for life, rigorous, simple imprisonment, forfeiture, property, or fine. All of these are seen as different punishments, and like I said, it's in order of the seriousness. Death penalty being the most serious offense for the most serious punishment for the most serious offenses, and similarly, fine being the smallest of offenses. If someone is stopped at a traffic signal for not wearing a helmet, they can't be imprisoned for life. They can't be put through the death penalty. They have a fine because it's a small crime, and hence the procedure is very small. The traffic policeman cuts a challan and you are immediately asked to pay. If you don't pay, then you're threatened to have your vehicle seized, which is why in a simple punishment, the procedure is simple and the punishment is quite small. If we look at the classification of crimes, and this is something that will come a lot of times in our CLAT papers, there are bailable and non-bailable offenses, there are cognizable and non-cognizable offenses, and compoundable and non-compoundable offenses. For bailable and non-bailable, the distinction is quite simple. For bailable, it says that the crime, no matter what the crime is, the person is bailable until proven guilty. Until the court decides that the person is guilty, they can be set out on bail. At the same time, non-bailable offenses seem to present a situation where the police can arrest someone and they don't have to necessarily be given bail during the trial of the entire case. However, the reality is a little different. All offenses are bailable by default. Every offense, no matter what the crime is, the accused is allowed to claim bail by default. There are certain non-bailable offenses where the person has to apply for bail. In bailable offenses, the person should be getting bail without even asking the court. But in non-bailable offenses, the person does not have a right to bail. They can ask the court, and the court can decide if this case deserves bail or not, or this person should be set free for now. However, keep in mind, all offenses are in one way bailable. There are default bail and there is non-bailable. Non-bailable meaning you have to ask the court for permission or you have to seek bail from the court. Now, this means indirectly that in every situation, a person can claim bail. Okay. However, this distinction in criminal law does exist, that some crimes by default don't carry the right to bail. You have to seek permission from the court. There are cognizable and non-cognizable offenses which require a warrant or not an arrest warrant to arrest someone and take them to jail. And then there are compoundable and non-compoundable offenses. Compoundable and non-compoundable would mean that in compoundable, a settlement is allowed outside court. The two parties, the accused and the victim, can talk, can discuss if there is some way to fix this entire situation, and then they can stop the court proceedings. Let's say there is a theft or robbery. The person could apologize, maybe repay the stolen goods or the sum of money that comes with it, and the case could be dropped. Those are compoundable offenses. However, some offenses are non-compoundable. The court does not allow the parties to settle outside because they think the crime is too serious or too grave, and the courts need to settle this effectively to ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future, or the crime is taken very seriously. This is one way to classify the crimes. Now, as you may have already guessed, crimes that are non-bailable or crimes that are non-compoundable will be serious crimes, and they will carry serious punishment, which would mean the procedure for the same would also be quite complicated. That's a very brief understanding of the classification of crimes and what punishment is. What we'll also look at is general defenses. Now, we discussed this before. Every crime has multiple elements: actus reus, mens rea, and causation. Let's say I take away the element of mens rea, then there's no crime. These are general defenses. General defenses are able to take away the element of a crime, and that would mean the crime itself does not exist, which is why they're called defenses. It's a defense used by the accused to claim that they have not committed a crime and they should not be guilty. Let's take the example of intoxication. Involuntary intoxication would mean the person was not in the fit state of mind. This would mean that they could not have had intention to commit a crime. So if a person meets in a road accident after drinking and driving in itself is offense. But did they have an intention to commit the accident? No, right? Because you can't have an intention when you're drunk. They say that your mind cannot think of doing a bad thing. You cannot have a guilty mind when you are not in a fit state of mind. Similarly, the act of a child below the age of 7. The courts and the law believe that children below the age of 7 cannot have the mind to commit a crime. They cannot intentionally be committing crimes. They can't have a guilty mind, which is why children below the age of 7 just simply cannot be tried under criminal law. Children between the age of 7 to 12 are given this benefit of the doubt that if they have committed a crime, then you will look at the maturity level. The courts will look at each case subjectively on a case-to-case basis and see if children between the age of 7 to 12 have committed a crime if they had the intention. And it's seen whether they are mature or immature to decide whether the intention can exist. Similarly, in right to private defense, a right to private defense, as you all know, could be in the nature of grave, like self-defense. If someone is attacking me, then I have the right to protect myself and in that process attack them back. Did I have an intention to attack that person? No, my intention was to defend myself. In that situation, the intention cannot be proven, and which is why the crime does not exist. This is how general defenses behave. This is how general defenses allow accused or defendants to prove to the court that they are not guilty of committing a crime because they didn't have the guilty mind to do so. And because the guilty mind is a key element of a crime, if it is somehow proven or shown that there is no guilty mind, there can be no crime. That's our brief discussion on general defenses and overall a basic covering of criminal law too. The next step after proving a crime is this. We look at punishment, we look at how to avoid punishment through general defenses, and we have a better understanding of what the purpose of punishment and criminal law in India is. In our part 3, we will discuss other details and we will get into a few more nuances or a little more complicated topics about the role of a state and who are the parties involved in criminal law. For criminal law part 2, that's all. I will see you in criminal part 3.